do what sets your soul on fire, right? Because that's the way that we literally are connected. Do what sets your soul on fire. And as you do that, maintain constant love for yourself.
You are listening to The Gradient Radio, an open space to converse about creativity with creatives. And I'm your host, Antonio Knoxx. And today we have a special guest. Today, our guest is a mind-body therapist who is reclaiming space with consciousness and community well-being. Today, our guest is Ashley Williams. What's good, Ashley?
Hello.
How are you?
I am well. I'm grateful and excited to be here and to be in community and conversation.
Likewise.
Yeah.
So for the people who may not know who you are, could you introduce yourself?
Yeah. So really the way that I've been kind of entering into space these days has been really honoring where I've come from. And so I'd like to bring in my parents and my grandparents, but I am the I'm the granddaughter of Marie Virginia Bennett. I am the granddaughter of James Russell Bennett. I am the granddaughter of Betty Ruth Williams and the granddaughter of Franklin Roosevelt Williams. And then my two pillars that stand behind me, I am the daughter of Franklin Roosevelt Williams Jr. and Wanda Bennett Williams. And so what that means for me is that I am all in which they are, and I am all in which they hope to be. And I'm their starseed. So that's where I come from. I am a native of Prince George, Virginia. So it's right south of Richmond. But now I'm from Richmond. Richmond is home. There's no other word to describe it. I proudly live in the East End of Richmond and my work. So I crave and desire the connection that mind-body offers. So I'm a mind-body therapist. And through that, I've created an organization called BareSoul Yoga and Wellness. And so we started in 2015. And really the whole mission has been to really create space in our bodies for healing and our worlds for healing through yogic philosophy and yogic practice. And so really the creation of that was an ode to my own self-care healing. And it's just kind of rippled into a space in which others have an opportunity to come and learn. And now I have the Well Collective. And so the Well Collective has been in divine order of being an expansion of, once again, my own healing journey. And it's meant to be a space for intergenerational and multicultural healing through various modalities, a collective of individuals from artists to creators to musicians. And our whole mission is humanity. So centering humanity and all getting on the same frequency and wavelength.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's incredible. Did you have a script that you wrote before?
So, I've done this a couple of times, but it's from the heart. I always think that I need to prepare to really share narrative. And I'm sure it comes out differently every time, but that's really the essence of it. So, yeah.
So you mentioned that BareSoul started in 2015. What was the genesis for you to get to BareSoul?
Yeah. So BareSoul, like I said, is an ode to my own healing. And so I graduated from the University of Virginia. So right here, not far from Richmond and Charlottesville. And after I graduated, I thought I had these goals to I was going to go to grad school. I wanted to do all of these things. And but I ended up just coming home and just giving myself some space to really explore what my interests were. And so during that time, I was working in mental health. I was working in behavioral health. And I was working with kids and youth that had experienced many things from violence in their homes or in their neighborhoods to abuse of different forms, diagnosed with various mental health disorders because, that's what we do in this world, even when we know that there are barriers. So I was working and as a counselor then and a coordinator. And during that time, I was also trying to figure out my own life. I was like trying to figure out where I wanted to go, what I wanted to do. So that's number 2. And then number 3, during that time, my aunt, Josephine Sonora Bennett, she was diagnosed with cancer, and she was on her journey of, moving through it and, back and forth to the hospital. And, she was someone in my world that I really saw as a mentor, someone that I really looked up to. She did so much community work in Richmond as a social worker. And so as I was going through all of that thing, transition, working in a space that was filled with various experiences, and then also then encountering grief. So she ended up passing away. And the one thing that I remember is that right before she passed away, I was asked to write her will. And it was like 1:00 in the morning. And I was like, what is happening? And it was just a lot. So I wrote her will, and I just remember not crying when I was doing that, right? Like I just remember like bracing myself. And that's the moment that I think I like disconnected. And so moving forward, I struggled with her grief for a really long time. And it got to the point where I just like asked God, I was like, you need to show up. Like you literally need to show up right now. And somehow I landed in a yoga class, like at American Family Fitness. And I look at that in a sense of, I had went to UVA, did not, like I went to a yoga class and I was the only Black person in that class. And I was like, oh, this isn't for me. Also, memberships are so expensive. So I don't know how I landed in this. I had an American Family Fitness, like student membership still, and walked into a class. And I just remember moving through that class, hating it, right? But then at the very end, crying for the first time after like 5 or 6 months after she had passed away, and crying in a way that I felt like that was releasing. And so that was just magical to me. And I started doing my research. I started going to class like every day. Like I would skip work and go to class. And what that landed in, it was just like, I felt freer. I felt like I could show up more. I felt like more like myself. And so I just started reading and I started doing deep dives and studies. And so it was really just an ode for myself. But I came across this quote that was around like the difference between spirit and soul. And so soul was that place in our bodies where we feel, where we're like connected, where we, there's like a range of emotions. It just like lets us know that we're alive. And then there's spirit. And then spirit is like what guides us and like what like moves us through. And so as I was going through my own journey and I was working in these environments, I realized that the people that I was working with, and then I was also realizing my family, we're experiencing the same disconnection that I had, right? Like the same, like, challenging with moving through grief, the same challenging with feeling. And for me in that moment, yoga, like the movement, the breath work, the opportunities to find stillness, the meditation, whether it was with music or sound or being guided or by myself, was like helping me get back connected to that sense of feeling. And so, there goes BareSoul, right? So it was like an opportunity. It's been a means for me to really not just bare my soul, but like then being an invitation to teach others to then use these principles and practices to then bare their soul, to really get to the thing that really ignites them, to make them feel connected to life. And so there goes BareSoul. I started teaching. I went to go get all the education that one may get, right? And started implementing it in all the programs and practices that I was in. So I was working with at the Juvenile Correctional Center with youth that were incarcerated. I was working with schools. I worked with my friends who were young professionals that were also in this midst of transition. And the story lands, and just over the past couple of years, just being invited in spaces to do the same thing.
Yeah. There's this movie by Will Smith. Well, he's in the movie. It's called Collateral Beauty. And it basically speaks about the things that happen after grief, like the things that are created after grief. From my story dealing with grief, I always went back to that movie because I saw the similarities that were like starting to happen in my life and like the things that were created due to the loss of my aunt. And it also seems like BareSoul was almost the culmination of the loss of your aunt as well.
Yeah.
Have you had some time to like really reflect on the loss and to see what was created afterwards?
Yeah. I think so, you know, as, you know, being in like an entrepreneur, right? Like I truly believe I fell into that space, right?
For sure.
It's just came into the creation and the cultivation. But I think there's times in our lives where we just like we're so in it, like we're so in the movement and we're so in the thing that we're creating that sometimes we don't actually pause and look back and be like, like this is either connected, this has like moved or grown or evolved. And so it's been really important for me to pause and to reflect. And it's just recently that I was like, oh no, this is an ode to that time in my life where I was like really needing to, like I was really going through something, right? And honoring it for what it was and not having judgment around it. And then also seeing like the gratitude for it, right? Like being like, oh, like I think there's such a time in grief in general, right? When we lose something, it's like we sometimes get stuck in what we lost.
Yeah.
That we have a challenge seeing or saying like, thank you for teaching me the lessons in which I needed to either survive or to get here. Thank you for allowing me to go through this so I can like now be here. And there's an ebb and a flow in that, right? Like our life is full of ebbs and flows of grief and gain. And so in this moment, I can truly say like, I'm so grateful for the opportunity to have experienced her. Yeah. I've experienced the moment in my life where I felt completely depleted, experiencing what it feels like to be completely like shut off from soul connection or even spirit and guidance. And now saying like, oh, I'm also so grateful for this moment I'm just so grateful, right? Like it's just, it's an interesting concept. And so when I look at BareSoul, or I look at the community that shows up, I see myself many times and I see myself in others. And I think what also connects is that they can see themselves in me.
Yeah.
And that to me is powerful, right? And so I'm like, oh, I'll go through this if it's going to support someone else, right? Like I can go through this if I can like hold that space.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think I was introduced to you back 2014, 2015. And that was the first time I ever saw a Black woman or a Black person in particular who was a yoga instructor.
Yeah.
Right. Because before, to your point, like when you first went to it was not someone who looked like you.
Yeah.
Right. Can you speak to that experience and how people perceive you being in that place that most people at that time we didn't see in that place, being like an instructor or someone who was guiding people to a different place? Yeah.
So when I first started, I remember, I think I'm being an American Family, right? And I, love that. I guess I can name the institution on here. Here we go.
It's cool.
I did. So when I would go, it was a very diverse group of people in the space, but still being the only Black person in the space. And so I grew up in a very diverse area. And I've been in environments, but I can name that like a part of my life, I've been the token Black woman, right? From where I grew up to older. And what I mean by that too, and that's like just a term that, for lack of a better words, but the one Black person in a space, right? Whether it's in school, whether it's in dance, whatever it was. And so I grew to like just know how to navigate that and also feel quite comfortable in it, right? And then there's this moment when you're really going through something, right? And you need to be held and you need to be supported, you need to be seen. And I think that's the moment when I was like, and people go and search. Like, you know, if you go to a doctor, if you go to a therapist these days, or if you go to a counselor, sometimes most of the answers are going to go work out, go to yoga, go to, you know, somewhere else, right? They put yoga in there. And so the place is meant to be a space for everyone to show up and for healing. And so when I was seeking it, I would like walk in and I'm like, I felt very tender and raw already, but to then only be like a person that looked like me in this space, to be the only one that was like, I don't know if I really want to be that like
for sure
token one holding that space. And so that was just really interesting to me. And so navigating, there weren't that many teachers that were also around me that I saw. So I had to really look around pretty much globally, right? And so I was fortunate to have really amazing mentors, Black women mentors that were yoga teachers and, you know, following them on Instagram and going to different states to practice with them to learn. And that felt really supportive to me. And I think what was really important to me is that the same thought that I had of, you know, this practice isn't for me.
Yeah.
I heard that from everyone. Like, you know, Black people don't practice yoga. This is in 2014, 2013. So we've come a long way, which is phenomenal.
Yeah.
But during that time, nobody was really, I mean, not nobody, but it wasn't posted on magazine covers, right? And this practice is one that, you know, derived in Kemet in Egypt, right? And so it's an ancient indigenous practice, not just of what we really, what's highlighted is in India, but our ancestors practice yoga, like Rosa Parks practice yoga, Angela Davis practice yoga. So people and women that I look up to and that pioneers to learn from in history practice yoga, but it's not something that's like amplified. And so you look at a magazine, you just see, you know, white women or yoga pants and, you know, it's supposed to look a certain way with a certain body size. And so that for me was like, this powerful practice was doing so much for me. And there were nobody that I could really say like, this is for me.
Yeah.
And so it was really important for me to just invite the people that were around me to practice and then go into spaces that were communities that we were a part of, families, friends, my sorority, youth girl groups, mentor groups. And where I started was the Department of Juvenile Justice. And my practice was working with young Black males and girls. And that was a game changer because many said, Miss Ashley, Black people don't practice yoga, right? And so then to like really dismantle that like concept or that thought and then be able to like access it was just something I was like, oh, we got to keep doing this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I know that I used to pull up when I don't know if that was like one of your first spots, but I used to come up to like one of your spots back in like 2017.
Yeah.
When did you get to the point of saying like, I need a spot for people to come to?
Yeah. So that was key. And that was key. When I first started, I was working in all the environments that I just worked in, right? So I said I was in mental and behavioral health. So I was working in a lot of like after school programs and therapeutic day treatment. I was also working at the Department of Juvenile Justice in their reentry program. So a lot of the students that I worked with and even working in homeless shelters. So all of these community spaces in which I was working in, people had access to the practice because they were part of these community organizations. When they exited out of those community spaces, then they didn't have access. So I was like, well, where are they going to go? And ran into a friend at the time, and ended up creating a space downtown in Richmond. And so the whole purpose of the space was that it was meant to be like a community, a space in which community could come to access the practice due to like proximity, like location, education, finances, like you just were able to come there. And so that's where the first space came from. It was really meant to be a space in which the people in which I had access to and had touch points with in all these community locations. And I will name that a lot of the community locations were serving individuals that had like high health disparity, or like the space was there to address health disparity. And so that's when I was like, well, if they are just having access here and then when they get it back in the community, like, where are they going to go? Like the practice just ends. So it meant to be a space for that. And then it ended up being a space in which other teachers, specifically teachers of color and wellness practitioners, had an opportunity to teach as well. And we had fun with it, right? So we did, I love it. So, I mean, that's where we just kind of like used a lot of arts and entertainment. So we did like this thing called like beats and I don't know, all the things. Like when we did trap yoga, we had DJs, we had like meals together. So much fun stuff happened, but also deeply healing work happened as well. So yeah.
No, that's incredible just to see the amount of people you've impacted up until that point, but definitely like, honestly, like where you're at now, just by creating a space for people to come and go through their process of healing, basically.
Yeah.
So 2017, then you kind of took a pivot from coming out of that space into like a new phase in your life. Could you speak about that process and what made you make that pivot?
Yeah. So the space was meant to be a space that was accessible, right? And then what happens when you realize that like you're not as accessible as you really desire to be, right? So we were in a beautiful space. We were right on the bus line. We we were able to have like lower entry fees or also offer donation, but overhead is a real thing too, right?
Yeah.
And so I was beginning to really like having to like be a business owner, like really having to like worry about marketing when our natural community organically was forming, but it was creating this barrier of me having to like take my energy away from like vision and spaciousness to then create and to then hold the space, to then like have to worry about the logistics of like, we need to charge this much to make sure we make rent. We need to make sure we have classes at these times. And it just became too much of it was too much of a fight and not so much flow. And so one thing that I've learned over the past, decade is to be in the flow. And so when it feels or it starts to feel like a fight, figure out why it feels that way and then see if there's an opportunity to get back into flow. And that might mean that you're gaining something or losing something. But for this state, it was that, I wanted to meet people where they are. I wanted I wanted myself and others to have access. And I knew that we could be more impactful. So we ended our time there and we went completely mobile. And literally when I was in this moment of like fight, like, oh, should I stay? Should I go? And I will say that I struggled a lot with like image during that time. Like, you have this space, it's beautiful. And then to make the decision of what I truly felt in my heart to like leave this space was like, oh crap, what are people going to say? Like, are we going to be as successful as we've been? Or like, does this mean we failed? And I had to sit with myself and I was like, no, like I'm not in the flow in the work in which I know that I want to be in or that I need to be in to like meet the needs, not just of the community, but like meet a need in general. And so I asked my friend, my friend asked me, she goes, well, how much money do you need to like just completely just like feel good about going community based? I was like $25,000. And I just said that. And she was like, oh, the universe is going to give you $25,000. Literally, I applied for a grant within like 3, and I asked for $25,000 and I got $25,000 within like a month. Right. And not only has that same opportunity come every year since then, but it was like that moment of like stepping out on faith, like trust that you're here for a reason, trust that you feel this way, ask for what you need. And that's been my biggest lesson. And so pivoted out, went completely mobile. The first car that I've ever bought in my life is the BareSoul van, which is a Nissan NV200 cargo van. And when I tell you, it was, and it has been the best purchase of my whole life. And then just the fact and the empowerment of creating this like van that's going to carry yoga mats around, like it's been wild. So had that and just started serving community in the spaces that they were. So like we were in nonprofits, we, all these hospitals and health systems, we did outdoor events, but filled it with everything that we need. And we literally quadrupled. I think our number was like 120% growth once we went mobile. The amount of people that could show up in our spaces and that we could create spaces with, and the amount of partners. And so it was just beautiful in that way. And so I was like, okay, we made this right decision. And so we have been completely mobile since 2020. Yeah. And then of course another pivot.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say, like, during those times, once you made the pivot from that space into going outside and reaching the people, you were like everywhere. Mm-hmm. You were everywhere. Like, it was like post here, doing this, doing that. At that time, how did you find the balance and, doing for others and doing for yourself?
Yeah. So that's the question of the day, right? The question of the hour. I think I get that. That's the number one question that people ask me.
Really?
Literally, that's the number one question. And during that time, I will honestly say that I don't know that I did a good job. So up until like that 2017 to 2019 time period, when we had went completely mobile, I was also figuring me out, right? And so I literally probably looked like I was in the best shape of my life, right? Like I was like running, exercising. And I think that what I was doing also, it was like I was like trying to like still find my way. So I was just like doing the things that I knew would take care of, like what I thought on paper would take care of me, which is also the same thing that happened when in 2013 when my aunt passed away, right? Mm-hmm. So I was back there. It's like those moments of like self that have been pivotal where there's a grief there. And so that shift from the space into community, the grief was the space, right? And so then there was a part of me that like needed to keep going, but I also loved it. It was like social connection and human connection is something that really thrives on, like that we thrive off of. And it's also like a wellness and self-care practice. So it's like I had this balance of being in community, and my way of taking care of myself was like the go. But that didn't last but so long. And so when I look at that, I'm like, oh, I don't know that I did such a good job because I didn't decipher between what it meant like to take care of community and to take care of myself in a way. I was like, I was using one for the other versus allowing them to complement each other. And so fast forward to this moment, the way that I do that is I honor my solitude, literally honor my solitude. I know that I am so much better of a creator and a visionary. I'm so much more balanced because of the moments that I spend in solitude, whether it's in prayer or meditation or journaling, whether it's taking a trip by myself, But moments where I get to really know what it feels like to be in my own body. So then when I am in community and in the midst of creating community and even in the logistics of doing the thing, I know what I feel like in balance versus the latter, right? So if I'm in some type of stressful situation, like my body's like, oh, Ashley, you're getting stressed right now. It's not like it happens for like 5 days and then I'm like, oh, I'm stressed and I'm ready to like blow up. But in this moment, it's like my solitude, feeding myself spiritually, right? And that happens in my solitude. Being with the people that really nourish me and being with the people that nourish me, but in healthy ways, right? And I create that time. I am not, what's the word? I make sure that it happens, right? Like I carve it out. And also asking for what I need. That's a big one. So being everywhere and doing everything, I'm like, oh, I can do it. And I'm like, oh, I can do it perfect. And if I don't do it perfect, I'm going to figure out how to do it perfectly. That does not serve me anymore. I don't know that it served me then. It got me. I say thank you because it has gotten me where I am in this moment. I'm getting really good at asking for what I need. Asking for support, receiving it. And that helps me show up in community because I can't sustain community or I can't sustain any type of vision or project or whatever it is if I am first not sustainable.
Yeah. So you spoke earlier about the I can't speak. You spoke earlier about the manifestation of the $25,000 that you needed. Was that your first affirmation that you had the abilities to be able to ask for what you wanted? Or was there many times before then or many times afterwards that you saw that you had the ability to basically ask for what you wanted or needed?
Yeah. That was truly one of the first times that I think I was able to like observe and witness that manifestation came to world because where else would I get $25,000 from? And the fact that she like literally asked, she said, what do you need? And I was like, $25,000. And where did I literally said out of my mouth, I said $10,000 would be great. But I would love $25,000 to really get it done.
Yeah.
And the fact that I know that those words came out of my mouth and then put in the work to make it happen and then to receive it, it was like, and I tell this to many of the people that I work with, it's like the mind, body, spirit connection is real, right? And when we've used these terms like manifestation and alignment and all the things that we use, right, to describe, this esoteric world, right, that we can't necessarily see, or this self-care, self-journey jargon, there's work behind each of them, right? So manifestation, it's like, I said I needed it, right? I said that I desired it, right? It was a soul desire.
Yeah.
Because this work is soul work to me. And then I put my mind to do the work to apply and to show up and like meet people, right? So my mind was like, okay, you're set with this. My heart desired it. My voice said it. And I think in that moment, then like spirit aligns with it. And when I say spirit, I mean God, I mean faith in which is not seen. My ancestors, like, I think there's just so much energy around that like, if you put it out there, somebody gonna have to catch it.
Yeah.
So there's that. And that was my first time because then I got this and then I was able to use it. So it was like tangible, So that was one of the first times where I was like, oh, okay. And I think since then, most of the opportunities that I have had the opportunity to be a part of, or the privilege, like right now with the Well Collective, it's a privilege. Like it's not something that I've created. It's a privilege to manifest deeper work and invite community to be a part of it.
Yeah.
It's a privilege. And so I think I said out of my mouth, like I was like, I desire to go deeper, right? And if I say I desire to go deeper and I have a sphere of influence that's around me, it's like, oh, I guess you desire for people around you to go deeper. And then to then be given the opportunity to be in this current brick and mortar that I'm in, it's not me that has landed me there, right? Like if anything on paper were to like say that I should or whatever, like if anything needed to be written down on paper, it's not there.
Yeah.
And so I trust that a lot of the things in my world have been manifestation through aligning my mind and my body and my actions and trusting and faith to bring the things to life.
Yeah. No, I mean, that's great. That's great. I definitely, I've seen it in my life. I've seen it in other people's lives, just like the power of speaking of things and then seeing it come to fruition. And it always just does something to me. Like it just it changes my life for like the things that I ask for. And so for you to hear your story about like that moment, like you said $10,000, but like $25,000 would be like the thing that I really need or I will want. And for that to manifest, not like you said a month later, I can only imagine that trajectory of like how you felt in that moment. And so I just wanted you to kind of like expound further on that. So you were in the streets for how many years? Like after you made the first pivot and then you was going everywhere, how long was that period?
Yeah. So we're still very community based, but we were actively, I mean, even when we had the space, we were like, I think that's what made me decide is that we were in the space and we were in the community and the community just flowed so much more fluently.
Yeah.
Right. Like it just flowed. And so once we left the space, I think that was in 2019. We left the space. So we were, completely mobile 2019 to 2020. Or well, completely mobile the whole time, but really mobile and active only for really like a year. And then at the 2020 came and we had so many programs on schedule for like the whole year. And then COVID hit. And so that I just remember March 2020, we had so many programs. Like I was so excited. Like I was like, oh, we are rolling. People are asking us to come into their schools. Like I just remember like not fighting, but I had to really advocate to, bring yoga and mindfulness and meditation into all of the environments. And at that point, it was like people were asking. And I was like, yes. And the pandemic happened. And what happened in that moment, and this goes with one of the questions you are just, I just talked about, was that version of like self-care versus community care. And so one of the mottos that like I hold true to is community care is self-care, right? When we show up in community, that is a way that we do take care of ourselves. It's not all that, but it's a crucial factor because we are interconnected. And so in that moment, the majority of the teachers that worked with BareSoul are Black and brown men and women. And not only at the beginning of the time, like experiencing family members, being the most vulnerable to COVID-19 was not a time that we needed to really be showing up for others. We needed to show up for ourselves. And so what happened is that many of our community programs came to a pause and some of them shifted to virtual. And what I needed was to ensure that the people that were holding so much space for others were cared for. And so we, I did a poll with my team, and I thought what I thought was best was that we just took a pause so they could take care of themselves. They could take care of home. They could be there for their families. They could rest. Because not only we were experiencing the pandemic, we were experiencing like racial uprisings, and we were experiencing the protest, and specifically here in Richmond, we were in it, right?
Yeah.
And so it was really important for me that we all cared for ourselves as space holders. So we paused programming. I took everything off schedule, at least for, I think it was like a month and a half, 2 months. We never really fully went back. And then all of our community programs that went virtual, the one thing that we realized is that, or the one thing that I think this world realized is that, our mental health wasn't doing well. And that caring, the well-being of your staff and within corporations was of utmost importance during that time. That, it is self-care, but it's also community care, not just within our churches and in our hospitals, but like we really all needed to focus on our well-being. And so our business and request, like, once again, I think it was way over 100% grew, right? So, and we were serving people like in virtually here, and then as well as in person. No, not in person, but virtually. And the one thing that I realized during that time is the essence, like really, really the essence of what we all need to care for ourselves. And that was connection, right? We were quarantined, and so we needed connection. We also needed to feel held. We also needed moments to decipher what was happening in our mind. And we also needed to kind of take our own space to breathe. And so we continued through that summer. I was called to really bring people together when it was safe. So we started our classes up again at 17th Street Market. And so this was a time where we wanted to really amplify and highlight Black voices. And that's the majority of our team, and like Black wellness practitioners. And so we started bringing out different teachers to teach classes every Wednesday. And that was powerful. Like that's, I think, when I really realized the depth of the work. It wasn't just that we were teaching programs. It was that we were building relationships, and we were doing it in a safe and supportive way. And 17th Street Market is the second largest place of commerce of enslaved Africans outside of New Orleans. And so I've been doing work around that. I've been doing a lot of work around trauma and mindful-based restorative practices, not just on the mat. Clearly, that's the work that I do in institutions. And I just started building a deeper relationship with, like, we all need to know who we are. We all need to know where we come from. We all need to know, why are we wanting the monuments down, right? Why are we angry, passionate? Like, why are people wanting the monuments up? Right. So like, for me, it was a crucial time in our city to like, okay, like sit back and like, let's all figure out who we are. So then we can like really talk about this and really move through it in a way that's going to be more helpful for us. So as we did that, we, during that time, pivot again, my dear friend asked me, as we were like doing our 17th Street Market classes, bringing out like 100 or so people and doing this thing. She's like, well, what are you going to do when it gets cold outside? And I'm like, I don't know, go back to our virtual programming. Like, what do you mean? This is what we're doing. And she was like, well, I'm going to move out of my space. And so she had a yoga studio, and it's downtown, right in Shockoe Bottom. And she was like, Ash, like, you're the only person that I would, offer up this space to. And she was like, and honestly, I love her to death. She's literally like, she's like, Spirit's telling me to leave. And I'm like, okay. And I'm like, I don't know. Like, in the middle of this pandemic, like, what money am I about to move into this place with? Like, why? And so we like merged on it, and she would bring it up every so often. And I started seeing these numbers like 11, 17. And, I'm so aware in this world in a sense of like numerology is pretty big to me. I have angel numbers that guide me daily. And I started seeing 1117. I was like, what does this mean? And so my life path numbers are 1 and 7, right? Like I know that. I know that. And I was like, I don't know what this means. Fast forward. I kept saying no. I was like, what? Fear, right? So like no better word than like fear of what this is, but then also not even really clear with vision. And so time comes, we get to October and I'm talking to her and she's like, Ashley, I don't understand why you keep saying no. Right. And when I tell you I saw 11 all the time, I saw it. She was like, I don't know why you keep saying no. She was just like, all you have to do is sign the lease for 11/1 for 7 months. And I literally just started crying. And I was like, that's 11/17. I was like, got it. Okay. I was like, okay, this is what we're doing here. And so I trust that was my sign that I needed to trust in something bigger than what I could see. And I tell you, this went on for 3 months of me being like, nope. I kept getting distracted. I was trying to create new things. And it wasn't even that she said it and I was like, it wasn't like we weren't thinking anything. Literally, as soon as she said like 11/1 for 7 months, I was like, just like something hit me. It was just like, hello, if you don't hear this sign, if you're not knocked over by this, like I can't help you anymore. So, so we signed a short-term lease and we started holding classes there. We started operating in a way that, if I wanted to continue, would that be supportive? But the biggest thing that came from that is I walked into the space and I was like, this isn't BareSoul yoga. I was like, it's not BareSoul yoga. Like, I don't want a yoga studio. I never desired to have a yoga studio, right? In that capacity. And I was talking to one of my mentors, one of my colleagues, and I was like, this isn't the BareSoul yoga. I was like, this isn't BareSoul yoga. It's like, it's bigger than that. And he was like, oh, well, what is it? I was like, this has to be the Well Collective. I was like, this has to be the Well Collective. And I was like, and during meditation about like, probably like 6 or so years ago, I had a dream. I was meditating. I came out of meditation. And like the Well Collective was like huge, right? Like in my thing. And so I wrote it down. I created an Instagram and I was like, I don't know what you want me to do with this. But I did that like 6 years ago. I was like, okay. But I was so in the busyness of life and doing BareSoul and some other things. And I was like, I think it's the Well Collective during this conversation. He goes, well, Ash, have you looked up the street? And I was like, I was like, yeah, like buildings. He was like, that there's the well that's up the street, right? And I was like, and it's one of the auction sites and for enslaved Africans. And so I was like, okay. I was like, this is the Well Collective. And in that moment, I realized that I had to step out on faith over fear and that this path of mine is not mine. And that and then I'm simply there and here to bring forth gift and to bring forth vision in a way that like actually has nothing to do with me. I just have an opportunity to like have the privilege and step into responsibility.
Yeah. Yeah. And that was going to be my next question, right? Like, so it's like the Well Collective, because I remember you speaking about like, you saying like you had this vision and it was constantly something that was on your mind.
Yeah.
And then for that place to become what it is now, how does it feel to be in the midst of a vision, living out a vision and that vision essentially flowing through you because you are the vessel that ultimately that it's allowed, I forgot what I was saying. I lost my train of thought, but like for the vision to basically be able to see the vision play out. How does it feel?
Yeah. The first word that comes to mind is overwhelming, right? Like, it's been overwhelming. But overwhelm comes from when there's uncertainty and lack of trust. And yeah, so that's the only way that I can really describe the initial. Is like, what is happening? Who has me here? Like, what in the world? So it's been a little overwhelming and a little fearful, but only because of the uncertainty of both trusting myself and trusting in faith, right? And like not believing that like we're moving forward. And on the opposite end of that, I appreciate equanimity and the opportunity to be and feel two things at one time, and letting two truths be there at one time is immense gratitude, right? And I sometimes struggle. Like I'm really stepping into gratitude right now, because when a bill has to be paid, or when rent is due, when a plan changes, like it has been on me, right? And so I'm like, "Rah!" So that's where the overwhelm comes from. And then if I'm spacious and open enough to look around and see all of the support that's around me, and to trust in it, and to ask for what I need, it feels like I am so grateful. I'm like, how in this world have I been given the privilege to receive support, to like provide support, to serve, like to even have a vision that sometimes my mind can't even like see? I'm like, what? It's miraculous, and it's also like mind blowing. And it's also really grounding, right? Like, it's grounding because it is a continuous opportunity to feel supported and loved, right? Like, and I say this, I'm like, God, how? Like, you must really love me, right? Like, you must really love me to like say, here, like create space where people can come and love themselves. Create space for people to come and be in community. Create space for the bigness of it. And I say humanity is our mission, which was something that someone said to me yesterday. But the space in which we land in, I don't like to do this, but I tend to relate to Richmond as the epicenter of oppression, right? It's the epicenter of economic development in our capitalist model. It's the place specifically in like Shockoe Bottom, where families were broken, lives were lost, people's ability and nature to be labor was seen as more important than their humanity or their life. And so for me, that's not something that just happens in the Black experience or Black community, right? It touches all of us. It's like that sense of value, whether you're a woman or a man or non-binary, whatever you identify as, if you are, whatever your socioeconomic status is, whatever sexual orientation you have, whatever it is, whatever age you are, we all experience some type of form of internalized oppression. We experience externalized oppression all the time, right? The way that our systems are created, the way that we even act in like relationship and patriarchy, and we all experience it. And so for this country, America, right? Like oppression just runs through the things that we do. for the land of Richmond, we breathe oppression and we don't even know it. Like, there's no way that so much trauma happened in this city and we can't feel it even generations beyond. And so where the Well Collective is located is very much at the heart of this happening, along with like Charleston, South Carolina, along with New Orleans. And so as I have journeyed to kind of get a better understanding of who I am and this Black woman body at the age of 35, working in wellness, but working in community and being able to be in relationship with other people, getting to understand my family and my lineage, and then also even thinking about where I want my future to go and creating legacy. It's so important for each of us to really tap into who we are and knowing ourselves and doing it in a way that's like non-harming and doing it in a way that's connecting and doing it in a way that is compassionate and non-judgmental, but also doing it in a way and in a space where other people are doing the same thing. So like the work that I do of knowing myself, or the work that we do individually as knowing ourselves, is then understandably interconnected with another person's opportunity to do that. And so for me, the space of the Well Collective, like, you know, I look at it, it's like literally a space in which, if we were to talk about like ideal, like it's not a brand, right? It's a space that it invites in a collective individuals and identities to come in and know themselves. And when we know ourselves, like that's liberation. That's liberating. That's loving. And how do we do that consistently for like greater impact in this world, specifically around centering humanity, right? Like humanity is love, right? Like the foundation of humanity is love. We were created in love. We were created to live this life. And when you harm someone, like they're not acting in love. If you don't see them for who they are, that's not love, right? So it's not a Black thing. It's not a white thing. It's not racial. It's not, you know, it's beyond labels. It's just like, can we actually center humanity and do it in a way that has such a big impact and like not just ripples through Richmond, but ripples throughout our country.
Mm-hmm. I don't know what to say after that. That was...
Yeah.
Got me choked up.
I know. We should have poured you a glass of water too. Yeah.
So what's next for Ashley Williams and BareSoul Yoga and the Well Collective?
Yeah. So in this moment, I am learning to trust. So for Ashley is learning. This way. Yeah. Sorry. Here you go. Ashley is learning to stand in faith, right? And release fear. Mostly in using my voice and trusting that everything that's led up to this moment and the creation of this place, the relationships that I've drawn, like trusting that it's all for a reason, you know? So that's with me, and putting all of my energy into continuing to do my own self-work, right? This phrase has been really prominent in my world lately, but I can't sweep another person's porch unless I sweep mine, right? So, and I say that because we all hold a lot of baggage from things that came in our lifetime, things that came before. We have a whole lot of mindsets. So really continuing to get to know me is the best thing that I can do for anybody. And trusting that the more that I know myself, the more that also this vision will come into life, because I'm so much more grounded and I'm so much more strong and I'm so much more able to receive So that's me. And with the space written on the wall by a local artist is it's a mud cloth, and it means that when you center family and community, then you step out of fear and you move into bravery, and that leads to an abundant and prosperous life.
Mm.
And so I wish that for those who come to visit the place, right, and come to be a part of it. And I wish that for myself. I wish that I continue, that I really create space and really create a narrative and an opportunity to like rebuild what it means to be in relationship with each other. Like, how can you really take care of your family and your community and still lead to abundance?
Yeah.
Right? Like abundance in heart, abundance in money, abundance in relationship, abundance in both like spiritual and material means. But how can you really prioritize and rebuild and restore family and community and still have that same simultaneous balance with yourself and know that they're interconnected? So with the space, I hope to continue to invite people in, like locally and globally.
Mm-hmm.
The space is going to grow, right? It is definitely going to grow. I hope that many people retreat to it, whether it's for a moment of a day, a month.
Mm.
I hope that it prioritizes service, and many community leaders are just visiting there, but are grown there. And I hope that we do the real work to really rebalance all the harm that our actions as humans have caused.
Yeah.
And that we come into that space of love, again, in all the ways that when we live in a loving space shows up. So I'm going to be asking for a lot of money. So if y'all see me somewhere, I'm probably going to say, like, we need money to continue to build this space. We need people, right? And we need energy.
Yeah.
So that's where I'm landing.
Yeah. So typically we end with a last gem, right?
Oh,
but
okay.
you dropped so many gems. You dropped so many gems. But if you had to leave a gem in terms of using grief, because essentially BareSoul was the catalyst from losing someone and creating something else out of that. What would you say to the person who is going through that right now? And yeah, what would you say to that person who's just trying to find that way of?
Yeah. So I'm going to put these together. But I would definitely say, do what sets your soul on fire, right? Because that's the way that we literally are connected. Do what sets your soul on fire. And as you do that, maintain constant love for yourself.
Yeah. That's great. So I want to say thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming on. Thank you for giving me your time, because I can imagine you're a full person. And for us to have this moment right now is just pretty great. For those people who are watching, for those who are listening, I just want to say thank you.
Yeah. Thank you for having me. I'm grateful.
Of course. Well, my name is Antonio Knoxx. That is Ashley Williams. And this was The GRDNT Radio.